Now, it is time for Media Watch, and James Creedon joins us in the studio. Hello there,
Laura.
James. Now, you've been looking at the analysis of what is going on in Iran. Of course, it is very difficult to know exactly what is going on because of the restrictions on the press there. It doesn't have a free press. So you've been looking at what is being said in the Iranian media itself.
That's right, and you can break it down, as you often can, between the more reform-orientated press in Iran and the very conservative press. So Courrier International, it's a French media that basically did the job for me. They looked through the Iranian press, and so I'm just relying on them because my Persian is a bit rusty. So this is indeed. So Arman, which is one of their more reform-orientated newspapers, said that these demonstrations are an opportunity and not a threat. Now, this was actually a direct quote from President Rouhani. So a lot of newspapers apparently today were striking a note of calm. In other words, they weren't over-dramatising what's happening, and they were taking a more optimistic stance. Another newspaper, Etamid, I believe it's pronounced, echoed some worries from the more educated middle classes, a lot of whom demonstrated back in 2009, and now they're looking at these protests. They see them as being largely leaderless and largely without a kind of a unified message. So there's concern about the nature of these protests coming through in some of the...
They are spontaneous, and they are springing up in 50 cities now. We've seen people
that's the part that I think is kind of really unprecedented. So they have a headline here which says, calling for dialogue, calm and good management. So there's a kind of a concern that this is just a bit disorganised and chaotic. Now, also in the same newspaper, there is a Samina Rastajer. She's a journalist, Iranian journalist, and she said there's an obvious principle here. This is part of the general sense in the reform-orientated press that the government should listen to the protesters, that there should be a degree of understanding for what's going on. And so her quote here is, there's an obvious principle: if you prevent someone from talking, he or she will shout. If you deprive someone of hope for his or her future, they will finish up barely even caring about what will happen to them. In other words, if you ignore someone, they could become, if people are in a state of despair, they could behave in a reckless and dangerous fashion. Meanwhile, quick look at the conservative press. Unanimous condemnation of what they call foreign agents, enemies of the people, appeals for fierce crackdown then on the protesters. This is a newspaper called Kayhan. Riots, murders and vandalism is the headline. These are not crimes. These are crimes, rather, not a form of civil contestation. And the highly conservative Javan newspaper, they've lined up a whole load of US politicians here, including, of course, the President Donald Trump, who have given their backing to the protesters, saying the hopes of the American and Saudi authorities of weakening Iran are unrealistic.
They've got Ivanka in there as well.
They do.
Okay.
I'm not sure if she said anything. But...
Now, of course, a lot of the real news is on the social media sites, but of course the regime is cracking down very hard on those sites, because that is how you organise a protest, as we saw with the Arab Spring back in 2011.
Absolutely.
So the authorities are really having a tight hold on that. Reaction to that move then? Well,
Facebook and Twitter have been absent basically from the landscape there since 2009, since those first protests came in. Telegram, which isn't so used in the West, but it's very encrypted. It's quite a safe way for people to communicate with each other. It's not easy to hack, and it's got 40 million users in Iran. It is the most used social network. Instagram has some 20 million, so they're the two at the forefront, and they've both been restricted. Now, there were various cases where there was a sort of a back and forth, if you like, between the telecommunications ministry. You can see one tweet here shared in an article saying, shut down this particular channel that is promoting the use of Molotov cocktails. Now, Paul Durov, who is the CEO of Telegram, he did in fact shut down that channel, but then he didn't go far enough in terms of what the government requested for channels to be shut down, or various accounts. So, in fact, it ended up being restricted. Now, just to take a kind of a brief step back from this, I thought it was interesting to... We hear about this coming out of Turkey in 2016, social media being silenced. It happened in Iran, in India.
Twitter was banned, wasn't it?
That's right. And in India. But actually, I was surprised to learn in this article in the Brown Political Review in the US, there were 81 government-ordered disruptions of the internet across the globe between July 2015 and June 2016. So this is actually happening all the time, even though last summer the UN inscribed internet access as a human right, actually. They made an amendment to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to include human rights on the internet. In other words, freedom of speech.
Freedom to communicate.
This is being quite flaunted quite a lot.
OK, James, thank you very much indeed. James Creedon there.